everyone, welcome to the Priggya Arora Show, where we discuss different aspects of law and legal entrepreneurship through conversations with people who have been there and done that. Today, we have a very special guest named Ryan Schneer. He is a former patent examiner at the USPTO and now runs his own law firm. So let's directly dive into the conversation with him and ask him about his day. So Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you for being on the show. And I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart to accept my invitation and just be here. So to start with, Ryan, the first question is like, if you were to introduce yourself at a business meeting or to someone who you just met, so how would you do that?
So I would say my name is Ryan Schneer, of course, and I'm an attorney. Usually that's at a business conference. That's the first way to introduce myself. So, and then, you know, if we talking, I'll explain that I was a former patent examiner and a chemical engineer. So usually those are the big items that I discuss whenever I'm meeting a potential business contact, because those are usually pretty important things to make sure that we have a good business relationship. So if they're looking for patents and if they're looking for an attorney, those are the big details of my background that they would like to know. So yeah.
Perfect. So Ryan, can you share your personal journey, that how was your journey choosing like moving from different aspects, from being a chemical engineer to a patent examiner to a patent attorney? How did that transformation happen and what was your thought process behind it?
When I was in law school, I'm sorry, beforehand, when I was in undergrad as a chemical engineer, I took a course called Intellectual Property for Scientists and Engineers. And the purpose of the course was really for engineering students to be educated on IP, to learn when they go into a company to not have their IP taken from them by their employers. That was the original purpose of the course. But what ended up happening with me is I got so interested in the subject that I decided that maybe I would be more interested in pursuing that as a career than engineering. And that's what ended up happening. So I ended up going to law school and focusing on patent law. And after I graduated law school, the economy still wasn't really great. It was back in 2011 and the legal market was slow, but the patent office was hiring. Sorry. Patent office was hiring, and it looked like a great way to get a lot of experience in patent law rather than some of the other students who were starting at law firms at an entry level and were maybe not getting the substantive experience in patent law as they would have hoped, specifically the ones that were doing litigation and things like doc review and everything. So I decided that this was probably the best career for me instead of trying to find a law firm job at that time. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made. Becoming a patent examiner was one of the most important things for being a patent attorney, because most patent attorneys I learned don't understand how things work on the inside and don't really do a good job for their clients in terms of getting a patent through the patent office. We could maybe talk about that a little more, but then I went to a smaller firm, and the firm really wasn't doing excellently in the sense that, you know, they had a lot of longtime clients, but they weren't bringing in a lot of new business. And as a result, I had to switch to a larger firm. And I was there for about 2 years, and it felt like maybe it was 4 or 5 years. The hours were very long. I worked a lot. The people were excellent. One of the big misconceptions I noticed about big firms is that people weren't very nice. That hadn't been my experience. Everyone was very nice. I think the problem I had was everyone was so ambitious and everyone worked too hard, and there wasn't anyone there to just put things in perspective. And I found that in many ways, the way they practice law wasn't the right way. And it was for reasons they would never consider because they were so focused on working hard and making as much money as they could, like insane hours. So I came away thinking maybe there was a better way to do this. We were in the middle of COVID and people were really reconsidering what they wanted from their lives. And I spoke to a couple of attorneys that were younger, and by younger, I mean, mostly in their 30s and 40s, not 50s and 60s, like some of the older partners. And I spoke with a lot of younger attorneys, including who would end up being my counsel, who were doing things in a very different way. And it got me very inspired. And my plan had originally been to leave my firm in about April or June of this year. This was back last year in late 2020. And I ended up getting so inspired and optimistic about the prospect of starting my own firm. When I spoke to some of these people, I actually left in February, earlier than I had targeted. And sort of the rest is from here. It's been amazing starting a firm. So I'm happy to answer more questions about the firm specifically, but that's my journey from there to here.
Great, Ryan. This makes me remember my times and how I started my own firm. The thing was, I think it's so relatable that traditional law firms have such long hours of working, and we as young lawyers want to transform some of that and do not incorporate the same working models in our law firm. So just to try and figure out a new model, we just start with our own law firm. So thank you for sharing your journey. So another question that comes to my mind whenever I think of you as being a patent examiner and then switching off your profession to being an attorney or a person who started his firm. So you must be having insider's view of what happens at the patent office, how they consider the application, what is the right application, what is the wrong application, what are the right claims, what are the wrong claims. So can you give us some perspectives about how patent office works and what do examiners really consider?
This could be its own conversation. I'm going to have to keep it short. There actually is if you look it up, there's another podcast of me a couple of years ago with LexisNexis where I talk about my inside perspective at the patent office. So I go into a lot of detail there. It should still be available online, but to keep it short, I could maybe talk about like the one big thing that patent examiners don't like to see that I still see attorneys do all the time, which is the biggest thing patent examiners care about is the claims. And what I find attorneys do a lot is that they argue things other than the claims, rather than focusing on what is the claim language that is going to be allowed by the examiner. It seems so simple, but a lot of the time what attorneys will do is they'll go off script and they'll end up talking about something that they didn't claim or just generally go off and talk about this invention is so wonderful and unexpected. And they get frustrated. They're like, the examiner's not listening to me, but it's not that the examiner is not listening. It's that the examiner has been trained to not consider anything other than the claims. And it's your job as an attorney to show the examiner why the claimed invention, not something you wrote somewhere in your application, is patentable. And that's the biggest thing I learned, is to focus very heavily on making the claims simple and readable, and that the attorney could look at the claims and notice, hey, this is the thing. This is the one thing, at least. I mean, you hope that there's more, but this is at least the one thing that I can allow, because examiners are not out to get you. That's the other thing I sort of learned at the patent office. Examiners are just as incentivized to allow the case as you, but they're afraid to allow the case in a lot of cases. They get more credits from their employer internally if they allow the case. So when I hear attorneys say examiners want to reject, I can't imagine that's true. And I know as an examiner, it wasn't true. I wanted to allow cases, but I was scared to. I was scared to allow something that was invalid. I was scared to allow something that my supervisor didn't think was patentable. So coming away from that, and getting rid of that big misconception allowed me to be far more diplomatic to examiners and view working with an examiner not as an adversarial relationship, but as someone more like a judge who needs to be persuaded. Like they want, like a judge wants to rule in your favor. Like sometimes you'll have an oral argument and the judge will say, please tell me why I have to rule in your favor. And some attorneys will think the judge is being sarcastic or snarky, but I always think the judge is being sincere. The judge is scared that they're going to be overturned, that they're going to make bad law. So they're looking for something that they can write in their opinion to say, this attorney is right, and I don't have to worry about being overturned by the appeals court. Examiners have the same fears. So I have found that if you give examiners ammunition to allow your case, you make them not just feel confident that you invented something, that your client invented something patentable, but certain that your client invented something patentable. Then you'll be able to get a patent on it. I mean, there's a handful of bad examiners, I'll admit that, and especially in certain areas where they believe that certain things shouldn't be patented. But by and large, I do think examiners don't want cases to go on forever. They want to give you a patent, and they want to give you a patent on something that is reasonably broad and allowable. And I don't want to get into that, but that's another misconception, that examiners only want to allow narrow claims. They want to allow valid claims. And if you could show them one claim limitation that's not in the prior art, it doesn't matter how narrow or broad your claim is because it's allowable. So I don't want to get into more detail because I know this isn't a patent examination strategy podcast, but I think that's the big part of it, that examiners are not your enemy, that they want to collaborate with you, and they are trying to get patents granted also, even though sometimes it might not seem that way. So, yeah.
So Ryan, great insights, because I feel that it is a kind of a negotiation process that goes on between an attorney and an examiner, where both the parties want the application to be granted, and they can just work around the right strategy so that appropriate claims fall into place and they get granted. So thank you so much for sharing the insight. So another question is, how did you decide that you want to leave your profession as an examiner and be an attorney? What was the transition point and how did you choose this career?
So I think I sort of touched on that before, but that was sort of always the plan. I initially did not want to be a patent examiner because I wanted to get employment as an attorney right away. But when the opportunity presented itself, I realized that it would be better for my long-term career to pursue the career as a patent examiner to start. So when I did get an offer from a law firm, and I was sort of looking towards the end, it was sort of a foregone conclusion that I was going to leave at some point. So it was sort of already the plan that I was going to look for a couple of years. But one of the big reasons, and it was honestly personal, that I left is that I was located in DC as a patent examiner, and my wife, who was not my wife at the time, she was living in New York, so we were commuting a long distance, and the firm that offered me a position was back at home in New York, so that was a big impetus for me to leave. I did have a couple of other positions that I was considering, but they were not back home. So I ended up not taking those. So some of it was personal, but some of it was also professional. It was definitely part of the plan to leave at some point and become a patent attorney.
So yeah, thank you again for sharing that. So Ryan, so how does your typical workday look like, and what are the important things that you make sure that you take care of them throughout the day?
I mean, I'm going to answer the lawyer question. There's no typical work day, but usually in the morning, I answer my emails. That's the most important thing. Communication is the most important thing to me. I try not to let emails go unanswered for longer than a day. So getting started with the emails is always the most important thing. And then usually I have one or two client calls throughout the day. So I usually space them out. So typically I'll have one in the morning, one in the afternoon. If the day's busy, I'll have maybe 3 or 4. It's been the way it's been working out. And then if the day is not busy, I'll usually work on a couple of projects. So in the morning, I'm typically an afternoon, evening person. My energy levels are typically lowest in the morning. I'm usually on more than one cup of coffee. That's just the way I am. So usually in the morning after answering emails, I'll take care of things like my accounting and billing. So if I've got any billing coming in, I'll sort that out. And then usually the other kind of things I'll tackle in the morning is sending out client reports. So if we get an office action, handling docketing. And then in the afternoon, once I've cleared all the little things away, if I have a deeper project to work on, like a patent application, I'll usually try to clear my afternoon away and work on that for several hours if I can. So that's the way it's been. I expect that these type of days, as the firm goes forward, are going to start to shift and become few and far between. Speaking to other law firm owners, it's just not feasible to, as your practice grows, to have time to sit and write a patent application for so long. But that's part of my favorite part of, that's really my favorite part of the job, that I'm going to do that while I can. But at some point I might need to have an associate help me out with that. So that's the goal at some point.
Perfect, perfect. So I like, how beautifully you told that you have a segregation between a day where you take tiny bits of work at one time. Like in one part of the day, you take care of emails, accounting, docketing stuff, and things like that. And then you do focused work like patent drafting and preparing an application, which requires your focus. So the two things do not, intermingle with themselves, and you have some segregation between them.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's been a big topic of discussion among myself and other law firm owners. I know we talked a little bit about challenges, and I did not bring this up, but I've been talking about this a lot, that as a law firm owner, you have to wear different hats. And I like that the hats are in two buckets, always in my opinion, and it's very hard to switch gears. There's the business side of the law firm, which includes business marketing and all the administrative stuff, which at a large firm, which I always compare it to from where I was at, it's always interesting. That stuff is the stuff that falls on the highest level employees at a law firm and also the lowest level employees at a law firm, which I always find to be strange. Like that's the really the most important side of running the business. And the associates are really not even part of that. It's the partners, and then it's their assistants. And that's a whole other discussion. I always find it really interesting how partners seem to have a closer knit relationship with their assistants and their paralegals than they did with associates, who always seem to be coming and going. And then there's the other side, which is the legal side. And okay, I find it really hard to switch gears between the two sometimes. So that's why I try to split it up. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge. And then when you sprinkle in the conference calls, it can be exhausting, especially for me, at least, switching between like the emotional intelligence side of my brain, speaking to clients, and then having to step back and go into scientist lawyer mode and work on an application. I struggle with it. I struggle with it because when I talk to people and I answer emails and I interact with people, I tend, if I need to sit down and focus on something, I tend to get distracted because I've been in extrovert mode all day. And the other way around, sometimes I struggle with the opposite. If I'm sitting there working on an application, I have difficult time brushing myself off and shaking off the cobwebs and talking to somebody. So it can be a challenge for sure. And part of the reason why I think as a law firm goes on, it's important to surround yourself with a great team, because I'm learning very quickly you can't do everything exceptionally well. I mean, I think I'm doing a very good job at being a jack of all trades right now, but at the point you need specialists to be able to really deliver excellence in each area of your business rather than being spread too thin and doing everything. So that's the goal over the coming years, I think.
Ryan, I think this is the initial struggle of every business owner, that it's really very difficult to switch gears. And whenever we are drafting and an email communication pops up, or a WhatsApp message from a client pops up, we tend to switch and take a look at it or check the email, and then it's very difficult to get back to, oh, what was the technology, where were we, what were we writing, what was the paragraph, what is the paragraph number, and things like that. So in my initial days, I used to have two laptops, one strictly for client communications and another strictly for drafting. So when I used to draft the application, I was completely off from all the communication, and it helped me a lot. So I don't know if some viewer maybe wants to try this, and I think it worked really well for me. So maybe for some viewers also, this strategy might work.
Yeah, that might be a little too extreme for me, but I think the sentiment is really good to get through to future law students and lawyers, that's going to be one of the challenges they face in their career. And it's not something they teach you in law school. That really have to, as a lawyer, you have to have at least two minds, the one like interacting with clients and doing the legal work, and being able to bridge the gap between the two is really hard. And law school really only teaches you one of those things, which is the legal aspect. And I think the dealing with clients part of it is not taught at all, and is not something that's intuitive to a lot of lawyers. And it's where a lot of lawyers struggle. And even if you're good at dealing with the clients, then you run into some of these issues, like how do you switch gears from being someone who faces clients, which is not a skill exclusive to law, to going down and doing focused legal work. And then the other side of the coin is, how do you do focused legal work and explain it to the client in a way that makes sense to them? So those things are definitely the biggest challenges of being a lawyer, in my opinion. So
okay. So switching gears, and people management, interacting with clients, managing tiny bits, and doing focused work at one end and doing multiple tasks at the other are some of the challenges of being a business owner and just starting up your business. So yeah, thank you so much for that, Ryan. So now I'll ask you, what is the most exciting part of the day, or what is the most exciting part of your present work life?
the most exciting part, I think the most exciting part, I would say twofold. One is able to work with a new client is always very exciting, because a new client that comes in usually is either an entrepreneur starting a business who needs a trademark, or it's an inventor that has an interesting new invention. So it's always exciting when I have a new client to work with, because it means I have a new technology to learn or business to learn about. And the other really exciting part is being able to work with the patent office and get some patents granted. So getting a patent allowed is always the most exciting part of the job for me. And I've been lucky to have a couple in the short time at the firm that I've gotten a lot, which I'm very happy about, to have some success in a short amount of time. And as we mentioned earlier, the patent office is very tough to get a patent through. Some examiners can be very challenging. So that is always very rewarding as a patent attorney to get patents granted. So those are definitely the two things: working with new clients and getting successful outcomes, like getting patents granted, of course, getting trademarks granted, successful litigation. All of those things are extremely exciting. And especially to share with the clients, that's one of my favorite parts, when you have good news, and especially when the matter has had its ups and downs. Yeah. Some of the most rewarding ones are the ones where it doesn't seem, it seems in the beginning that things are going to be a little rocky, or when you're writing the invention with them, writing the patent application with them, you struggle a little bit to understand what the invention is, and you have to go back and forth, and the drafting sometimes takes a little longer than you would have thought, because there's some little nuances and details in the invention that are really tricky. Those are the ones that end up, I find, getting the successful result at the patent office sooner. The ones where during the drafting, you've really toiled with the client and struggled to find what's patentable. I find that those get allowed at quicker. Ironic, maybe not, because if you put in the work on the front end, maybe the patent office really does appreciate that, and maybe a lot of attorneys aren't doing that as much as they should. But that I have to default to that. Writing a patent and getting it granted is probably the most exciting and satisfying part of the job, because it gets to the core of what we do, and maybe why I wanted to get into law to begin with. So, yeah.
So working with new clients and getting positive outcomes from the patent office and sharing good news with the clients is the most exciting part for you. So thank you so much for sharing that. So let's now discuss about benefits and challenges of being a law firm owner. So you started it very recently, and how is it for you? How is the journey? What do you think are the benefits and what are the challenges?
So benefits, I would say certain things have surprised me in terms of benefits. Like I had not thought it would be as easy as it was to obtain clients. In the beginning, I had to do a lot of marketing, and I continue to put in a lot of consistent work marketing. But what I found is that if you just constantly put in even an hour or two each week to business development, like posting an ad, being on a podcast, I usually do more than that because I integrate it into my schedule. People eventually, all of those little things add up, and you start to establish a digital footprint through social media, through search engines, and people start to find you. And the other thing that I notice is you really don't need, as a small firm owner, you don't need as close to as much business to make money as a large firm. So my overhead is really low. So because of COVID, I run this firm virtually out of a home office. All of my files are virtual. I've managed everything through very sophisticated software subscriptions. I use the best cutting edge software that's affordable, designed for small firms. In the big firms, they spend a lot more money on their overhead. So as a result, I've been able to establish right now a small but growing and loyal client base that's been able to even give me a bunch of repeat work in my first year. So I think that's the big benefit. You don't need to have a big footprint to make a good living as a small attorney, because you could keep your overhead low. Now, as I scale and hopefully grow, that might end up changing, especially as if I have employees. But it surprised me that when you strip away all the bells and whistles out of practicing law, a big benefit of small firm practice is it can be very freeing and an easier way to practice law, because a lot of the pressures go away. As for challenges, I think the biggest challenge for me this year, and it's been echoed by some other smaller I've talked to, it has been isolation and loneliness and lack of collegiality. So one of the things I've missed at a big firm is that, even during the pandemic, we used to have a weekly Zoom meeting where we would talk about cases, where we would just see how each other's lives were going. And I really, really loved my colleagues at my last firm, despite the fact that we worked very hard and the job was very grueling and exhausting. My colleagues really made the job worthwhile. Just such wonderful people I had worked with. And I got to be honest, I miss them a lot. I miss being able to have that camaraderie. I miss being able to just talk about a case with somebody without it being awkward, because we don't work in the same firm. And it's more arm's length. Sometimes I have this with my counsel. We're at different firms, and it's just hard to have that same collegial connect actually on the same team. I do work with a couple of other lawyers too, and it's nice, but it's not quite the same as all being in the same firm. So maybe at some point, and that's the goal, I'll grow and I'll be able to create that experience again for myself. And that's definitely a goal to work towards in the long term, for sure. Maybe not in the short term, because those things take a lot of time to build that large of a practice. But that is definitely the biggest thing I miss, is the camaraderie.
I am sure you'll have a big team of yourself, and it's like we all need some support, a support in some kind, because I also started very recently, and now I have a team of 6 people. So I know the time I started. When I started, I was alone, and people used to ask me that what is your biggest fear. So I used to say my biggest fear is fear of being alone. Like, I don't know whether alone I'll be able to set up this and work for this organization, or I'll be able to do that or not. But step by step, as the team starts building up, I think you feel so amazing that you have done something in life, and you're now contributing to the lives of other people as well, because we all are again working together and having interactions and things like that. So I'm sure you'll also grow up in a big team. As it is, your credentials are so good, and you're such an inspiring human being. So thank you so much,
Well,
Ryan.
thank you. One of the things I want to convey to young attorneys, that you don't need to be perfect to be able to succeed in your own practice, that you can make mistakes to overcome them. And that was really an eye-opening thing for me, that there were people, I went out looking to see success stories, but what I came away reassured by is that those success stories also had little elements of failure in them, and they still ended up being able to run their firms successfully. And knowing that starting a law firm, that there's room to be resilient and learn from your mistakes and improve without having to worry about the firm itself not being viable, that was really reassuring for me. So I really appreciated speaking with people and learning about the mistakes that they made. And I think that's actually really important for young lawyers in general, to speak with your mentors and get a relationship with them where you could see the human side of them. Because if you have this image of lawyers always being perfect and on all the time, then it's going to be very challenging to succeed in the practice of law as an actual human being, which we all are. And you're going to be constantly fighting your need to eat and sleep and see your family and all that other stuff. And most importantly, be open with people and have real relationships with people around you, rather than the types of arm's length competitive relationships that are very common at large law firms. So, yeah.
It sometimes committing mistake is considered as it's inhuman, it's unnatural, but mistakes are natural. We all have imperfections. We are not perfect, and it's absolutely okay to be imperfect, or to make mistake, to come up across failures. And I think if we don't have failures, we don't learn in life. So it's even okay to fail in business. It's okay to fail in relationships. It's okay to fail anywhere, and then stand up again and live life again and be happy.
Absolutely. And failure, I don't really believe in the idea of failure, in the sense that the only way you could really fail is if you give up. Just because you don't succeed right away doesn't mean that you failed. And I think a lot of people think that. But if you try something 50 times and don't succeed, and then succeed the 51st time, are you a failure? I don't know, because you succeeded the 51st time. So, like, if that's all you need, then it doesn't really matter if you failed those 50 times. So that's sort of the way I see it. I think I've experienced a lot of failures in my career, but none of them have been career defining, because I've worked to overcome them. And I think that I don't know a single lawyer who hasn't had a perceived failure at any point in their career. The most successful lawyers, and you look at their resume and you won't see anything that you would consider a failure, but you look at their resume and you'd be like, okay, they were at a bunch of firms. Well, what happened between that second and third firm? You don't know. They could have been pushed out. They could have had a feud with partners. They could have lost all their clients. You don't know, and they won't tell you unless you're really close with them. And I was very fortunate at my large firm to very close relationships with some of the top professionals in the field. And without revealing too much, I will tell you that, like everyone else, they have their flaws. They are really excellent at certain things, and I find that the best partners really struggle in certain areas. I worked for someone brilliant, the most genius patent attorney I've ever met. He had ADHD, couldn't organize, had an incredible assistant because he needed it. So it sort of goes back to what we're saying about having a community. You're going to learn you can't do it all. And that's a big problem with the way we train lawyers in school and in legal practice. We say you have to be good at everything, but there's so many different legal skills. There's legal writing, there's legal research, there's organization, there's patent applications, different from litigation. So this idea that you have to do it all and be perfect and all of that, it's becoming destructive. And I think the more we have conversations about being human and making mistakes and learning from them, I think we'll be able to move in the profession from what I hope is, like, right now we have a culture of perfectionism, and I'm hoping we move towards a culture of excellence, which is more about making mistakes and learning from them and striving for a high standard rather than bludgeoning our employees over the head with them, saying, you must build these number of hours, otherwise you're gone, or you must achieve this result for the client, otherwise you're a bad lawyer. Life doesn't work that way. And people are complicated and messy and not perfect. And people should be doing what they're good at. Yeah, sorry.
Ryan, this made me remember that
I could talk about this all day. This
yeah. But I was saying, I remembered that I was watching some video and they were speaking about perfectionism, and the speaker, he said the people who aim to be perfectionist are the people who don't know how to deal with their insecurities. Like that, they really do not know how to deal with their insecurities, so they hide behind the mask of being a perfectionist because they're not open to accepting their failures or imperfections in front of the world. But it is human, it is very much natural that people commit mistakes, and it's okay to commit mistakes.
Yeah, the irony is the best client relationships I had are with clients where there was, I don't know about mistakes in every case, but there was some adversity on the journey to get the results. And I find that as an attorney, if you put out this air of perfection and everything that you have to do has to be perfect for the client, what I find happens is that you don't build the deep kind of relationship with the client where they're loyal and because the relationship becomes more transactional. It's almost like I don't want to say making a mistake in every case, because it's not always a mistake. Sometimes it's a setback. More often it's a setback. Like in the litigation, you lose on emotion, but you have to keep going in the case. Or a patent examiner rejects your case application initially. Those types of situations where you have to work together with the client to overcome a hardship. Or it could be a mistake. You make a mistake and then you show the client that you're able to be accountable for your mistake. Say, look, I'm sorry, it won't happen again. I'm going to fix it. You could remedy the mistake by giving them some sort of discount or something. I have found that being willing to do that builds the relationship far more than if you never made the mistake to begin with, because clients know that their professionals are going to make a mistake. What they can't stand is when we pretend that we don't, because they know that we're lying. people go to their doctor, they know when their doctor doesn't know what's wrong with them, and they find it frustrating that their doctor has to pretend that they do. People find it very refreshing when people are just honest and human. And we can do that without sacrificing our position of authority as a lawyer. I think that's the big fear, that if we show people, the clients, we're human, they'll think the emperor has no clothes, so to speak, that, oh no, the lawyer's not anything special, it's just a person. But I'm not afraid of that. Let them, because that's what clients want. Clients don't like lawyers for the most part, like as a stereotype, a lot of them start out afraid of me. Like, are you going to overcharge me? Like, are you not going to communicate with me? Are you going to use all the legalese in your emails? And sometimes making a mistake and just being human about it takes their guard down. They're like, oh, this is just someone in business just like me, start running a startup firm, trying the best they can, being excellent when excellence is possible, but also struggling and failing in a lot of ways. And I think people relate to that a lot more. Clients don't expect you to be perfect. They expect you to be excellent, which a lot of the time is not compatible with perfection, because you can't be excellent at anything unless you fail. And you definitely can't be excellent at building relationships with people if you're not willing to actually be a human being. So not a big fan of perfectionism, even though I really struggle with it, which is probably why I'm not a big fan of it.
Great. So Ryan, just another question. So you share such good insights. So who is your inspiration? Are there some your favorite people that you follow, or books you follow, or anything that you follow a lot?
Yeah, so I mean, I look to sports a lot for inspiration. So I don't know if there's anyone specific. I follow a lot of sports in here a lot. I listen to a lot about what some of the best athletes have to say about performing and dealing with failure. Baseball fan, and the big thing in baseball is a really difficult sport. You succeed about 33% of the time, and listening to how players deal with the ups and downs of that to be able to keep an even keel, I think is very important, because every day in the practice of law, there's going to be a good or a bad thing that happens, and you really need to learn to roll with the punches. So watching sports and listening to athletes is something that I find very inspiring, because going back to what you said about perfectionism, sports is a place where it's impossible to be perfect, but the best people are excellent. The best athletes are excellent. So listening to how they've overcome their failures and setbacks to get to where they need to go is very inspiring to me, versus speaking with some people at a law firm where they'll tell you about how they've done everything right and made all the perfect career moves to get to where they are and all of that. I don't think that's the best path to success. So I tend to be inspired by athletes and musicians too. I love hearing about musicians. I love listening to anyone who has a dream and really struggled for it and didn't give up and eventually succeeded. So I was listening to someone I listened to recently that I was pretty inspired by, the talk by the founder of Alibaba, talked about how many times he was rejected before he succeeded. There's many other examples. As a patent attorney, of course, Elon Musk is a bit of an inspiration in the sense that I know not everyone's a big fan of his, and I'm not always, but what inspires me about him is that he has a vision for the world, and he is not deterred on that path to the vision, and understands that there might be setbacks and there's going to be a lot of critics, but there's not a lot of people out there anymore that have a vision for either running a business or the world that is positive and optimistic and forward-looking. I think it's especially hard now to be optimistic and have a vision for the world when so many people feel like it might not ever be possible in this current world to get that vision implemented. But that's why I admire people like that the most, because it takes an enormous amount of courage and perseverance to be able to maintain your beliefs and be able to work for something you believe so hard when nobody thinks you could do it. I think maybe I'm inspired by that because of maybe the fact that I can relate to it given my experience. So yeah.
Perfect. I am inspired, how you recreated the vision of sports players and music, and then Elon Musk. Yeah, so sharing their vision is such a great thing. And probably in patent domain, we are just moving the technology forward so that we can make world a better place for everyone.
Exactly. All right.
So now, Ryan, what would be some key takeaways that you want to give young lawyers and people who are still law students, probably, or anyone who wants to start their own practice?
Yeah, the biggest piece of advice I would give is that if you're not happy doing what you're doing in the practice of law, then stop doing that and try to find what you're happy doing. But you work too hard and life is too short to be in a job where you're unhappy. All that said, sometimes you don't get happiness right away. Happiness is not something in life that comes without hard work.
Yeah.
So in my first couple of jobs where I wasn't where I needed to be, was I as happy as I could be? No, but I tried to make the most of it, and I came up with a plan. Where do I want to be? And it's not even it's not where I want to be in 5 years. It's where do I want to be next? I think that's also a problem that young lawyers run into. We look too far ahead. You can't really look more than a year or two ahead. You could say, all right, this is where I want to be in 5 years, but what are the next steps to getting there? How do I get these skills? And if you really take ownership of your career and you say, okay, well, having a fulfilling career is the goal. As an attorney, it could be challenging, and I'm not going to get there right away. But if I work and I do all of these things, I can get there. You'll find that if you put in the effort to really think about what you want out of your legal career and how you're going to get there, you will eventually succeed. Whereas people that are unhappy in this profession and working long hours and feel like they don't have control over their lives, those are the people who never really took the time to think, what do I want out of my legal career? Why am I a lawyer even? Like what brought me into this profession? What inspires me? And some people, if you don't ask that question, how do you even know you want to be a lawyer anymore? I know so many people in this profession who went into it for the wrong reasons. So, and there's lots of things you could do with your law degree outside of practicing law directly. So that's the biggest insight for me is rather than just spinning your wheels and working so hard every day without reflecting, which is what some of these firms want you to do, take some time, take a breath, and think about what you want in your life. Like, I think that's honestly a big problem in general. Our practice does not take the time to slow down and think. And this is an intellectual profession. It's not, a lot of people are running around answering emails, reviewing documents and all sort of stuff. And that's important, but it shouldn't come at the cost of reflecting on what we're doing. At the end of the day, every piece of work product we have to put out has to be logical. It has to make coherent arguments. You can't do that when you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So, and it's the same thing with career decisions. If you're constantly striving and moving from accomplishment to accomplishment, you might achieve some of the things that you think you want, but are you going to end up being fulfilled that way? I don't think so, unless you really take the time and ask yourself, honestly, what do I want from my career? And if you're not getting it, be willing to maybe make some tough choices about what you're willing to do to get there. I made a definite short-term sacrifice leaving my high-paying law firm to start a firm, and I definitely have suffered the consequences for that in many ways, but it's been outweighed dramatically by the fact primarily that I've taken control over my life and that I've taken control over my career. And that's been more fulfilling than anything, honestly. To be able to have my own practice and work with my own clients. Like, to me, that's what the practice of law is all about. And I wish more young lawyers would get that opportunity sooner. And I think many who are in law firms who are not getting those opportunities should maybe keep more of an open mind towards creative ways to get those opportunities, like maybe even starting their own practice in a couple of years. So I know it's not for everyone, but maybe a couple more people would be a little happier if they considered it. So
Perfect. Ryan, I think, I resonate with you so much. Thank you for sharing this, because for me, I consider happiness is the most important thing. And if you're not happy somewhere, just look around, like you said, take a step back, analyze, and take control of your life. Beautifully explained, Ryan. Thank you so much for sharing this. And to the listeners, let's be more courageous, let's be more confident, and let's try. Even if we fail, it's okay, but let's try to do and do things, and take a chance, because we have, like Ryan said, we have only one life, and it's shorter. It's not a very long time. We have a very limited time on earth, so make sure that you spend that being happy. Yeah, I hope a few take your advice and they just start with their own practice.
yeah, it's, I don't want to say that it's for everybody. This is not saying like go out and start your own practice now, but I find that lawyers at established firms, that's a scary thought for them. And all I'm saying that if you've considered it and you're scared to, speak with a bunch of other attorneys who have done it and see how they've done it, see how they're living their lives, and see if that's what you want. If that's not what you want, then don't do it.
Yes.
But for those who do want to and feel like they can't, those are the people I'm speaking to. And I want to tell you, it's more possible than you think. It's not easy. Nothing is easy, but it's not possible. And there are going to be people who tell you you can't do it. You don't have enough experience. You didn't go to the right school. Like there's going to be, or like nobody's going to work with an attorney, the virtual practice. I've heard all of that stuff. If that stuff doesn't resonate with you, if those criticisms don't resonate with you, and you really believe that there's a different vision for the way that you practice, and you see other people that are doing things differently, not necessarily the same way as you, then just go for it, because there's always going to be people who did things the old way that are going to think that that's the only way of doing things. But the truth is, the world is changing and innovating all the time. So if you think you have something that works, and there's some examples of similar models working in the market, then just go for it, because it's probably a smart business decision. There's a lot of demand for legal services right now. So starting an innovative firm, my experience is you'd be surprised how much demand there is. So I hope this encourages more attorneys to be a little bolder, I guess. We tend to be a very risk-averse profession, which could be good. Caution is good, especially when it comes to advising our clients. But being overcautious prevents us from enjoying our lives. So that's sort of the part that I want to encourage young lawyers. And early in your career, we tend to be the most risk-averse. We see everybody above us following a set path, and we're so scared to deviate from it. But you can. And in many cases, stepping away from the pack at the right time could be the best thing you do for your career. So that's my 2 cents. Sorry, I know that we were ending, but I just wanted to add.
Not at all, Ryan. I know, whenever we start speaking about this topic, it's something there in our heart that we just want to share this with the world, that how much it means to us. probably quitting our jobs and starting the business, and same happiness we want to spread in life of many others. So be a little bolder, be a little courageous. If you are having two thoughts, like whether you should leave the job, whether you should start your own firm, speak to more people and take your decision. So yes, thank you so much, Ryan, for being on the show, and thank you so much for your insights and time. It was lovely meeting you.
It was lovely meeting you too. And thank you so much for having me. And if you'd ever be willing to have me again, I'd love to come back on and have another conversation. So.
Perfect. Sure. Thank you. Hey there, thank you for attending today's session. If you enjoyed listening to our guest, do follow our channel and consider sharing it with a friend. My name is Priggya Arora, daughter of inspiring parents, alumna of IIT Kharagpur, engineer turned lawyer and entrepreneur, and now founder of PA Legal, where we help creators and innovators protect their intellectual property. Thank you.